All right. I guess we're back. I'm not really sure what happened there. Must be like some internet connectivity issues on my end. Yeah, that sucked. Damn it. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm gonna try and close some stuff in the background so that it's a little bit more. It's a little bit easier on the internet. I didn't have that much open though, so I don't know what happened there. All right, it's good to be back. I didn't save your question though, the Happy 2. So it would be nice if we can get that one back. I wonder. Yeah, I had to restart Streamlabs OBS as well. Sorry about that, man. All right. So maybe it was like some people said in the Discord that Twitch didn't like me revealing all my secrets of painting out normal maps. Let's get back up to speed. Did you try to sing? Maybe. Well, you never know, right? Because I was singing this beautiful song for all of you, and then they just cut me off. Yeah, let's get back to the question, right? So we're talking about yeah, I'm sorry about that, man. Thanks for rephrasing the question. So let's get back to painting out normal maps, right? So I was talking about getting into the industry, and before that, if I had baking errors, I would just try to paint out errors like that. And you shouldn't be doing that because it's like an accurate representation where if you're gonna try to paint them out, it's gonna fuck with the normals anyway. I did some stuff where I would bake cylinders, for example, and then I would take one row of pixels and I would stretch them out across the cylinder, so it would have like a nice smooth edge instead of, well, at that point I didn't know about cages and all that stuff too, because then you don't have the normals going up and down as it tries to project the high poly onto the low poly. Also, this was because we had severe restrictions on what we could do. In Planet Coaster, for example, I think the maximum amount of edges that we could use on a cylinder was 8, and that was like an edge case even. So yeah, that was pretty intense when it came to like optimization. Oh, thanks for the follow, Vertex Snapper. I need to get better at calling those out too. But yeah, in general, painting out normal maps, it is bad. Just in general, if there's something wrong with your bake, try to fix it in the bake. Try to work out what's causing the issue. But there's, compared to when I was baking in the beginning, the tools have been so much improved. I was using like XNormal when I was getting into the industry, which is like a separate program that looks like it came out of the 90s. So yeah, it doesn't look all that appealing to start baking your normal maps in that. But now with Substance Painter, baking by mesh name, it makes it super easy to get to get closer to clean bakes. There's still some shapes that are really tricky to bake down, right? But yeah, in general, painting out normal maps, not a good idea. Let's have a think. Where were we? Yeah, the question was by Leon K. Where the question was it, what is the one thing or trick about environment art you learned when you started as a junior that made you think, wow? I expanded on that with like adding 2 or 3 additions to that, but yeah, it's a good question. All right. Next is by Anonymous, because this is a super tricky question, and I understand why they wanna keep their name off of this, and I'll do my best to answer. So, what is your favorite topping on a pancake? It's just white sugar or brown sugar, any kind of sugar. I'm not that big of a fan of maple syrup or any kind of syrup like that. Just give me some sugar on those pancakes, man. Next one. I'll also do my best to keep track of these questions so that we don't lose them again should the stream collapse on me again, because that would suck. So I'm just gonna copy these over. All right, cool. Next is by Anonymous as well. How do you know when your ideas for a portfolio piece are worth pursuing? I have some good ideas, but even if there's one thought of doubt, I lose interest and move on. And that's probably why I'm swimming in a sea of work in progress. Yeah, before we dive into that, have I tried apple puree with pancakes? Oh man, I'm not really a fan of apple puree, or like, yeah, I think that would be the translation, right? I was thinking about the Dutch term of it. It was like apple mousse. I haven't had it. I'm not a big fan of it. I mean, it sounds delicious, but no, I just don't like it. All right, so let's go back to this question, right? So, how do you know when your ideas for a portfolio piece are worth pursuing? It's a really good question, because I think a lot of people have a lot of ideas. It's just deciding on which one they want to pursue is a big question. And what I try to do is I try to see if an idea sticks for a long time. So there are a couple of things that I'm really passionate about or like really interested in. And one of the things that I found out quite recently is that I like to experiment on the side with some like a small hydroponic setup, and like how to grow plants with just water instead of soil, like the traditional way. So I turned this kind of hobby into like an infusion for my last scene, where I was trying to think how that would look like in the future if they would be mass produced. Instead of like the traditional farms, you would have like these new farms that are coming up, by the way, all over the place, where they have like vertical stacks of crops growing. So that is definitely one thing that I could say. Like, try to find the thing that sticks with you for a long time, because it's really easy to get motivated on the short term and be really inspired by like a Twitter post or an ArtStation post where someone posted like this really cool concept that you're instantly like, oh damn, I really want to make that. But you have to look past that and open that same concept up like a week later, and if there is any kind of, if it still excites you, I think you should go ahead with it. Because that's the thing, like all of this ArtStation and Twitter stuff that is coming onto your plate, so to say, like as you discover it, it's really good for that short momentum, but it's not really great for that long term, especially for environment arts like pieces, right? So I have some good ideas, but even if there's one doubt, I lose interest and move on. Yeah. I don't know. Like for me, what I found is that when I work on a project, I always get to the stage where I don't really like the project anymore. or there's this one stage that I don't like. It's like, I don't know. In my case, it's probably texturing, and that's why I mentioned it before. That is the one thing that I really want to improve upon. But it's something that I just inherently don't really like. I like making the scenes themselves, but not like going in and making separate textures and dressing it all up. Yeah, it's tough though. Losing interest and moving on. Maybe it's also a good idea to make the project smaller then, so that they're easily manageable, like easily completable in like a really short time span, so that by the time that you normally start losing interest, you already have it finished or close to finished, where it's like, okay, last 5%, I spent like a couple of hours on it, and then it's done and I can post it. I think the biggest thing here is just focusing on the fun and what excites you and what do you love to do. This is something that I notice in all my pieces too. There's always going to be foliage in it, because even if I don't want to spend like my entire career working on foliage specifically, I like making it because it's always nice to have that the contrast between the man-made and then the natural in a scene. So that's something that I'll always do. Yeah, I would look at your sea of work in progress pieces as well, and try and have a look at which ones are super easy to finish and that you really still like, and just finish them off. But yeah, it's a really good question. I appreciate it because there's so many factors that come into it, where yeah, there's so many things that come into it, right? Because it might also mean that you just like to do a variation of things instead of being pigeonholed into one thing, which I really empathize with as well. Because I don't want to be doing like one thing the entire time. I like to jump around. I like to dress levels and then build the block outs and then do some of the texturing, do some of the lighting. I like to do a lot of I like to have a lot of variation in my workflow. So, really good question. So we got a couple of questions from Raj, because he just finished like his latest piece, which is looking really nice, by the way. How long of a break should you take after finishing a big project? So that's where the question comes from. He recently finished like a really big piece, and he's now going through the period of like, okay, I'm done with this piece and not really sure what to start up next. And I think the break in this case should take as long as you need to. Oh, right in time, Raj. We were just talking about your stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I think the break should take you as long as you feel like you need to. Like if you don't have that kick to get started on the next thing yet, I would just enjoy the time off and keep looking around for inspirational pieces until you find something that you really 100% want to do, right? Is a break even necessary? No, it's not necessary if you want to dive into the next piece. That's how I've always done it. But I realize that some people, especially at the end, they might get a little bit frustrated with like the final 5%, because it's a lot of back and forth feedback, a lot of small improvements. Even though some people like that, and I do know that you love that step in the process, because it's such a big payoff, right? If you just get those last 5% in, it's gonna really make the last 95% of it shine. So I don't think a break is necessary, but it depends on you personally. If you want to take a break, take a break. If you feel like you're still fresh, and you want to dive into the next thing, just start on the next thing. Maybe try do something smaller this time though. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Thanks for the follow, guys. This is awesome to see. I'm still getting used to that, so yeah. Excuse me if I don't call it out. Next question, also from Raj. What's your process when deciding on a new piece to work on? So this sort of ties into a previous point that I made, where most of my pieces, I kind of know what I want to do already. Like it has to have something to do with foliage, like at least for a little bit. And I don't know, there seems to be like a couple of themes where I gravitate towards that I really enjoy doing. So I always, for some reason, I start with like a medieval kind of thing, like a medieval inspiration, like the last thing that I'm doing, where it's like just a medieval house. It's like a small diorama, basically. But then that project always evolves into something new for some reason. Maybe that's like my artistic workflow, where I always go back to medieval and then it just turns into something random. I think with Last Bastion that was like a different thing, because I've always wanted to do something industrial as well. But with the jungle piece before that also started as like, oh, I'm gonna make like a small medieval town. And then I enjoyed the foliage side of it a bit too much, and that just grew into an entire jungle at some point. Yeah, it's a good question. What's your process on deciding on a new piece to work on? That seems to be, it has to be something that just really inspires me on the long term. Like I've always enjoyed the MMO aspect of it, where they were largely set in medieval times. And then for the industrial pack, I used to do like a summer job at an industrial plant called BASF in Antwerp in Belgium. And it's just this massive place of just pure steel constructions. And I really enjoyed working there. And I think, especially at night, when I had to do the night shift, there was barely anyone there. And the entire plant was just lit up with all these kind of lights. I think that just really inspired me to do that industrial scene, because there's so much complexity in those plants. There's so much intricacy with all the pipe networks and all the connections. And I don't think with that piece I even do it justice when it comes to the scale, because just the amount of networks in that entire complex is so crazy. Like it's hard to understand how big those plants are. And I always enjoyed just walking through them and like exploring them a little bit when I was working. So that's probably where that comes from. Yeah, good questions, Raj. Thanks for those. All right, I think, let me just double check if we had more questions on the Discord. I don't think so, right? Okay, so Discord questions are good. Anonymous questions are good. Let's dive into some of the chat questions. So, yeah, just for people, I'm sending a reminder in the chat as well. Like, feel free to ask me anything. If you're curious about anything from game development, the games industry, being an artist, or portfolio questions, just go ahead. I would love to answer them. Okay. So this is a question from the Habicht 2. Do you feel like the skill level required to break into the industry is getting higher throughout the years? Oh yeah, I swear this question was phrased better before. Yeah, I'm sorry about that disconnect, man. Yeah, I totally agree. It's from what I've seen throughout the years, keeping in contact with some universities, it's it's just so crazy. Like the approachability of these programs, the approachability of, well, the ease of access of all the programs, of all the knowledge with like YouTube and just platform sharing like our platform or the Dynasty Empire or Experience Points. There's just such a wealth of knowledge going out that it's way easier than it was even when I was coming up. And we also had access to YouTube back then, but just the wealth of knowledge out there is crazy. And I think that also makes it easier to get to a good point of your skill level. Obviously, you need to still have the artistic fundamentals in there, where you need to know about composition, you need to know about how to use light, how to use colors. There's a lot of that stuff still going on. And I think schools in general, right? There's obviously some things to be said about art schools in general, but if I look at the entire landscape, I think I'm personally stunned by the amount of good pieces that are coming out as students. So yeah, I think it's only going to get tougher and tougher to get in, because there's only such an amount that can go into the industry, right? Unless you start your own company and you create your own job, basically. But that's really hard to do as a student coming out from university. Yeah, it's intimidating. Like, if I were to imagine, if I'm looking at students' portfolios and then looking at the skill level that they have, it is quite intimidating if I were to be a student at this time. But that doesn't mean that there's no room for you in the industry, right? Like, if you know from yourself that you might not be the best out there, this is the thing that I keep saying, like, consistency is key. It doesn't matter if you're the best now, or if the other people are the best now, if they give up after a year inside of the industry and then choose to pursue something else. It's about being consistent and just keeping after it. That is the important key, because this is the thing that I found out myself. I was never the best at anything. I still am not, and I'm probably never gonna be. But I was consistent. I never stopped working. I never stopped improving, and yeah, now I'm here. I'm in the industry. I'm at a good company. So it's all about just keeping at it, keep up the fight, and keep after it. That's a really good question. It's amazing to see the students just coming up these days. It's crazy, especially with all the new skills coming in as well, right? So like Substance is, well, texturing in general is becoming more accessible through Substance, because before it was all Photoshop, a lot of manual work. But now Substance made it super easy to do that. Then you have, I think, Quixel Mixer making it easier as well. But then you have these really technical time sinks like Houdini that is becoming more and more like an integral part of environment art in general. So if you already have those skills, that is also like a big bonus on your portfolio, or like trying to get into the industry. And I see my previous school, DAE, in Belgium, is currently adding that in to their curriculum, where they have like a minor, I think, in Houdini. So that's really awesome to see. Yeah, good questions. Yeah, keep them coming, guys. Did it take you long to get back to personal work once you made it into the industry? Did you take a break or kept powering through? This is a question from Hamish Ames. So yeah, thanks for the question, man. Another good question. Let me think back. because I started my internship at Frontier. So that was, I was basically doing my uni course, and then at the end of the uni course, you had to do like a mandatory internship. So I did that one, and I think at that time the Rookies was also starting up. So I did like a 2-week environment for them. So I don't think I ever stopped doing personal work. There have been small breaks, right? Like if you move to another country, there's going to be like a forced break. You can't really avoid that, which is good, by the way. But other than that, there were like a lot of smaller projects. I have like a couple of drives full of abandoned projects and like stuff that I was just like trying to figure out. A lot of technical stuff as well, where I was creating like a dynamic day and night cycle, trying to recreate like a wipeout at some point too, with like all the gravity shenanigans that come with that. Yeah. I think I was always working on personal work, and I think it's a really good thing to have, because even sometimes in the industry the work might get really monotonous, where it's like, especially when in certain phases, when the project needs to be shipped or they're in pre-production, you're doing a lot of the same stuff. So it's always good to have something to keep that creative spark going, even if you're going through these dry spells at work, so to say. Yeah, I don't think, because the second question, or like the second part of that question is, did you take a break or kept powering through? I don't think I can take a break. I think I'm a workaholic when it comes to that. I've always loved working on my own stuff, and I've always loved like exploring new things and exploring new possibilities, exploring new technical aspects. There was always something that I was interested in. So I was never really good at taking breaks. And I don't think this should be like, because I don't want to say that I recommend it to everyone, because everyone's their own being, right? Like everyone has their own personal schedule, everyone has their own personal way of working. But that is something that really worked for me, where I literally it started out with half an hour a day, but then that grew into 1 hour a day, grew into 2 hours a day, and then it grew in way too many hours a day, where I actually had to dial it back a bit and be like, okay, I have other things that I want to do as well. Which is something that honestly I still struggle with, where I get too excited about these things, and then I want to spend a lot of time in them, but then I stop focusing on other things that might be important as well. So that's definitely something that I still need to get better at. So yeah, that's a really good question. All right. Next question is by Sniper Echo. I have a lot of open world assets, buildings, walls, etc. Any tips for saving texture memory? I'm using seamless textures for the most part and augmenting the pieces with decals. Yeah, it depends on the amount of textures that you're using currently. Because from what I can read here, you're already thinking about like reusing a lot of the textures. So that's like a really good way of looking at it. If you're really tight on texture memory, and if you really want to push it, I would look into, instead of making full textures for every texture that you have, obviously for some pieces like a brick wall, you're gonna need like a dedicated texture for that. But if you have like generic metals, generic plaster, maybe you could just have a couple of procedural textures combined in an RGB packed texture, where you could have, I'm just naming examples here, right? So the first channel could be like a black and white cloud texture. The second one could be some scratches, like a black and white mask for scratches. The third one could be something else where you can have like a lot of texture variation only using like three, well, in this case, RGBA, so 4 textures. One texture with 4 channels, and then using those channels separately to create materials, like generic materials. Like you can create a lot of metals for sure. You can create some plasters, some generic wall pieces. There's a lot of reuse that you can get out of just using those more generic looking things, where you don't really need like a unique texture for all of them. Like for example, metals. If you just want scratches on metal, it doesn't need to be like scratches for every piece of metal that you want to have. It could just be like a reuse from a texture. And you could reuse those same scratches or same cloud textures to create some interesting roughness variation in another texture. And you might start playing around with the contrast or some of those values where you can do some additional refinements in Unreal Engine, for example, and create like a whole set of textures or like a whole set of materials without having like separate textures for them. Yeah, by the sounds of it, that's a really good workflow. Seamless textures with decals to spice them up a little bit. That's good. Yeah, no worries, man. All right. Did I miss one? No, I think we're good. Oh, no, I missed one. So we got the next question from Vanar. Do you work with Blender or Maya? So I started out in the industry, well, before I was a student, with Max. Then when I went into the industry, Frontier was using Maya, and now I'm using Blender for all my work. So I have experience with all of them. But yeah, I think Blender for now is by far the best one. This was brought up in the previous AMA as well. There's just something. It's so satisfying to use that. Where there's a lot of creative. I don't know what it is. Like it's a really good looking viewport, that's for sure. So that helps with like just your artistic insight and just like a artistic pleasure on the eyes. And once you get over the initial hurdle of all the hotkeys in Blender, there's such it feels really fluid how they work together, and that it's really simple to create shapes. Yeah, I love Blender. I know that I'm a big part of the Blender cult, but I mean, it's good and it's free. That's a big one for me too. I don't have to pay like at least $30 a month to do all the commercial work that I was doing before. So that's a really big plus. For someone seeking to enter the industry, would you say they should demonstrate one style, like either stylized or realistic, or would showing both increase your chances? I feel like it could dilute the portfolio, especially if you don't want to have time. If you don't have time and have to choose each project carefully. Yeah, that's a really good question. Da habe ich too. That's also a question that got brought up at the internship fair. Like I was a part of one for my previous school like a couple of weeks ago. And it depends on what you want to do. That's the biggest one. Do you want to do stylized or realistic? And if you wanna do both, that's still fine. But I think if you're looking at AAA companies or the bigger companies, they are usually limited to one style. Or in the case of, for example, Ubisoft, right? Because I'm a part of that. You have to look at the individual studios that do projects. Because you might be well suited for I don't know, this Ubisoft studio that does more like Rayman projects or whatever kind of stylized projects, right? But then you might not be suited for a different studio within the Ubisoft banner that is more focused on realistic perspectives. I think there is still some value if you already have both in your portfolio. I would look at it in a way where you push forward the thing that you like the most and then have that other thing. So say you want to focus on stylized, then you put your front page of ArtStation full with stylized pieces and then have another tab with realistic pieces, so that if a recruiter lands on your page, they can instantly see, oh, this person wants to do stylized 100%. And then they start going through your pieces, they have a look at the other tabs, and it's like, oh, but he also has skills in realistic. That's interesting. So it's never going to hurt your chances, because it's like an additional skill, right? Like, it's never going to hurt your chances of getting in. It's just, you have to look at your portfolio as something that you wanna project outwards, where you can let the recruiters or the artists that are looking at your portfolio from a studio immediately know that this is what you want to do and this is what you want to grow into. So yeah, it could dilute the portfolio, but it's never going to hurt your chances, right? Yeah, that last part, especially if you don't have the time and have to choose each project carefully, that's probably the biggest one. It's, you have to make time for the things that you love to do and then project that outwards. That's the thing with my portfolio as well. Like, if you go into my ArtStation, there's my personal work is in the forefront, because that's the stuff that I love to do. I love to create like entire worlds. And then in the second tab, I have my professional work, because I'm just more comfortable with showing my personal work first and then having my professional work up there. And that's also something that I've done on purpose, where if you land on my portfolio, you know that I'm doing personal work, and you know that that is the stuff that I put my passion into. So yeah, I hope that helps. It's a really good question. Some really good questions today from everyone. Yeah, I'm just thinking about there were so many questions that came up in the same style on that internship fair too. I think the biggest thing is just showing what you want to do is the biggest part. All right, let's go to the next question from Sniper Echo. So when using Blender, do you use Booleans in your workflow? And if so, do you have any tips on how to alleviate the pain that comes with Booleans? No, I don't use Booleans in my workflow. I'm not really that big of a hard surface modeler myself. So what kind of pain are you talking about when it comes to Booleans? There are some good add-ons for Booleans in Blender though. But yeah, I don't really. Maybe if Maha is still in the chat, he can just link some, because he's really good at some hard surface shit. Yeah, I know. I tried Booleans in Maya before, and I know that Blender is way better at them, because they were a pain. Like, trying to clean up all that geometry that came out of that mess, it was it's horrible. Okay, next question from Vanar. I started my first year in DIA in Belgium in game graphics production, and we learned using Maya. Do you think it would be better if they learned Blender instead of Maya? No, I don't think so. Because if you look at the industry in general, a lot of them are still using Max or Maya because all of the tools are still integrated within those programs. So even if I mentioned that I use Blender, right? There is still an additional step that I need to do compared to other modelers because I'm modeling everything in Blender, but then I have to get it in Max to get it into the game engine. So I have to do this additional step of setting up the proper naming conventions, setting up the proper folder structure, everything like that. So I think it's still better that they teach you Maya or Max in certain cases instead of Blender right now. But the industry is evolving quickly though, and a lot of big companies are trying to work out if they can make Blender work in the future, from what I'm seeing. So that's a good question. But yeah, I don't think it's bad that they still teach you Maya. It's also one of these things where if you learn Maya and if you learn Maya or Max and then you have to switch over to Blender, there's always going to be transversional skills where you can just take the knowledge that you have from Maya and just use that in Blender. Like the buttons are going to be at a different location. Hotkeys might be on a different hotkey, but as long as you get like the modeling skills and how to reach to the end result in the quickest way, like say for example using Booleans. Like Booleans are available in almost every program now, but they're just gonna be handled differently. So yeah, good questions, people. Yeah, feel free, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them down in the chat. We had a lot of good ones today. Kind of sucked that the stream fell out in that first part. Yeah, I think looking back at what I did when I was going into the industry, right? I was using Max, and then I had a chat with Frontier Development about my potential internship, and they mentioned that they were using Maya, and I told them that it was going to be no issue. I could switch to Maya in a couple of months, and I think I had 2 months ramp up or something like that. Like, well, 2 months in between that point and when I would start at Frontier. So I think at that point I was like, okay, I'm just gonna switch completely to Maya and just prepare myself for the job. Yeah. If the company is really interested, like this is another point, right? Like if the company is really interested in your work, the road how you got there doesn't matter too much. Because if you say like, oh, I'm really proficient with Maya and I have dabbled a little bit in Blender, because I think at that point you're gonna be doing that anyway, because Blender is such like it's all around us now. Like a lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people are trying to pick it up or at least trying it out for a little bit. Yeah, and again, it's free. But I think by the time that you get into the industry, you're gonna be good. It doesn't really matter. Like the company will even give you some time to get accustomed to the tools that they have as well, right? So yeah. I wouldn't worry about that. It's a good question though, because I had that same question as a student myself as well. Well, not about Blender back then, because Blender wasn't too good back then yet. What game are you looking forward the most when the PS5 is coming out? Huh. Good question. I don't even know if I had a look at the PS5 lineup already. Let's have a look. I think the only one that I know about is Godfall, I think. Let's have a quick look, right? Well, there must be some games. But I don't know which one of them are exclusive to the PS5 and which ones are on PC and all that stuff, right? Yeah. Because I'm not really a big console player. Like, I do have a PS4, and I bought that in the beginning when Horizon Zero Dawn was out because I was like, yep, that's what I'm gonna buy this console for. And then I think other than that, I played some other games on it though. Oh, Ghost of Tsushima. I played that one. But other than that, I don't think I've played that many games on it. So, yeah, not quite up to date with what's coming out on PS5. Rush, thanks for answering the questions. Let's have a Coco watch party. This is gonna haunt me till forever, man. The Habicht 2 asks, are internships basically the same thing as a junior position? And can you apply for internships like if your uni wants you to do one or half a year, even when there are no positions currently open? Let's break this up, right? So are internships basically the same thing as a junior position? That's a good question, but it depends on the studio. I can say that we kind of treat them as the same thing, but other studios have a dedicated internship track where they do make some sort of a separation between the two. So it's going to depend on the company. I would say that a majority of the company, I know that I'm generalizing a bit more, a majority of the companies, they will treat it as the same. Because yeah, I mean the ramp up is going to be a bit longer, right? Because, well, is it? I don't think in most cases it will be, because it's sort of the same stage depending on the internship, right? But when the time the internship is, because for example, if the person is going from DIA, like that internship is going to be like an end of your student career internship, where sometimes an internship happens in your second year, for example, where you still have to do 1 year after that. So it does depend on that as well. So yeah, if it's an end of your student career internship, I would expect them to more or less treat you the same as a junior position. There might be some differences between that, like when you're talking about HR terms, right? Because you're still technically a part of the school, so payment might be different. Maybe the help in location, like relocation, is going to be different. But yeah, I'm not an HR person, right? So it's kind of tricky for me to answer that with 100% accuracy. But that's what I'm assuming might be the case. Can you apply for internships? Like if your uni wants you to do one for half a year, even where there are no open positions currently? Yeah, I think you can. I think you should always try to do this. Like even if they have no open positions, just send them an email like, look, I'm looking for an internship, and just let them know that you're looking, because they can always say yes. Like they might surprise you and say like, oh, maybe we have like we were thinking about it, but it wasn't like on our plan yet, but it would be interesting to have you. You never know, right? So always send a message. Like, don't be afraid to just send them a message and be like, hey, I'm looking for an internship in that space of time. Do you have any options for people looking for an internship? Always try and throw your hat in the ring. That's what I do with just job search in general too. Because you never know if they're looking for people, but they don't have an open application yet. Or you might just build up a connection. Where it's like, oh, it was really nice to talk to you, but maybe in 6 months we'll have an open connection again, like an open application. So maybe try again at that space of time. And then maybe they might reach out to you because you're still in their system. So always keep that in mind. Another question from Dahabik2. Also, what game are you playing at the moment and would you recommend it? So I started playing Watch Dogs Legion yesterday, and I'm way too early into it to recommend it, because here's the thing with recommendations when it comes to my games, right? I play games because I want to look at the world. I don't really care about the storyline that much. Like I think I played, this is always an example that I bring up. I played Fallout 4 for like 500 hours and I've never completed the main mission. Because I just have fun walking around, doing the DLCs, doing all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I might, if you're looking for a recommendation, I might be a bad one. But I'm enjoying it so far, though. The world, I had fun walking around in future London yesterday. And I was exploring Camden, because that's like a favorite region where me and my girlfriend were love to go when we were in London ourselves. It's always interesting how they have to condense it while still retaining that original spirit of what is Camden Town, right? So that was really interesting. Just a random one from Lloyd. I think you discussed some game. Oh, games on the podcast, but that could be. I think you discussed some games on the podcast, but that could be on Xbox. No, it's been a while since I had an Xbox. I got the, what is it, like the 360? But then once I moved, I gave that to my little brother. So it's been a while since I played on Xbox, and also with like the new stuff coming out with Microsoft right now. There's no real reason to get an Xbox. Well, for me at least. Yeah, some games on the podcast. Yeah, we talk about a lot of games, right? Like we talked about Oh, okay. Okay. So that was when you were talking about the PS5. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm trying to keep up with the questions. I'm trying to pick up some stuff. Another one from Sniper Echo. How do you manage PBR validation in Blender? Good question, because I don't really care about how my textures look in Blender, because I'm 100% using Unreal Engine. So I have a scene now where I do like a quick checkup for my textures in Blender itself, but it's more about the shape and I don't really care about the roughness. I know this is like a really shitty answer to that question, but I always make my scenes in Unreal Engine, so there's no reason for me to try and tweak the textures in Blender if I'm going to use them in Unreal Engine anyway. But in general, that's a good question though. Like if you were to do PBR validation in Blender, that is a good question. I'm gonna make a note of that. So, because I do know some people that do all their stuff in Blender. Procedural materials. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea. And this is, I think you asked a question about the open world assets. Yeah, exactly. So that would be for your open world assets that you're trying to do. I'm trying to simulate the PBR validation tool in Substance Painter. Yeah. Oh, okay. I see. Yeah, I think I saw something float past on Twitter in the recent weeks where people clamp the values of the maps which is a clamp node in Blender. But if you want to do like validation, you would have to have like a material that you can just quickly throw on there to debug those things, or like have a debug viewport or something like that. So, I mean, that could maybe work if you clamp the values, but then all the values outside of that clamp are shown as red. Yeah, it's interesting to think about. I would be interested in how you tackle it, or how you find solutions for that. Yeah, I need to look into where I found it, because I saw some people dabbling it recently. I haven't done anything like that myself, but that's probably how I would start doing it. And then if that doesn't work, it will probably provide you like a good template to start doing that. I've never done any PBR validation on my side though. So, well, especially in Blender. So yeah, hope you can get it working. Would be interested to know how you fix it in the end. Oh, it's the one thing you feel Blender is missing. Yeah, but it's also because the shader that they use is more generalistic terms, right? They still use some remnants from Speck and Gloss. Oh yeah, that would be awesome. Shoot me a link, man. All right, let's go to the next question. Is this the guy who runs the Beyond Extend server and the Beyond Extend podcast? Yeah, it's a different Tim. It's not me. I'm just using all the banners and all the icons. I'm just a scam on the internet. What are the elements you focus most on when looking at a portfolio? Like, what are the most important things you need to have or not to have? This is another question from Vayner. Good question. I like to focus on artistic insight when it comes to environment artists, right? Because that is probably the most difficult skill to teach. It's just how they use a composition, how they use their colors, if they think about what colors they use, if they can lead the eye through the composition really nice. Because if you just look at the raw technical skills, like learning Substance Painter, Substance Designer, learning to model, those are all the technical skills that everyone has to learn anyway. But having that inherent artistic understanding of how to combine different things, or like how to make a nice composition, how to, when it comes to modeling, how to distribute your details across the model so that it doesn't become too noisy. That's a good example as well. So I tend to focus on that the most, but that doesn't mean that I don't focus on the technical skills, right? Because you need to have that technical understanding as well. If you see that someone has like a really good artistic understanding, but then they can't execute on it because they don't have the technical understanding, then that's not going to give them the end result that they want. Because you kind of need the technical understanding to be there to then help you execute on your artistic understanding. Because it's the same thing. Like, a lot of people can have good ideas, right? But if you can't execute on them, then it doesn't really matter if you have a good idea or not, because it still needs to be executed at some point. Well, strictly speaking about environment art, right? You still need to, in games, in the games industry in general, you still need to have people with really good ideas, and then other people can execute upon them. Not to have. If we're looking at an environment art portfolio, skill not to have. I mean, it depends on how we're looking at it, right? Because if I'm looking at a purely artistic, a purely environment art portfolio, and they have characters in it, I'm just going to ignore the characters. But that doesn't mean that that skill can't bring value to environment art. Because if you understand anatomy, you understand how people interact with stuff, then that can still inform how the world around them is built too. So yeah, I think when it comes to things not to have, I don't think you can actually go wrong there. As long as you still have the core artistic understanding with the support of the technical understanding, like the skills in the software, like we talked about before, any additional skills are only gonna elevate the rest of your work. Unless there's like a specific example that you wanna bring up. It doesn't have to be yours. It can be just what you've seen online recently. Then I can go into more specifics if you want. Have you ever played Tarkov? No, but I know someone who played Tarkov and plays it fairly frequently. And I was actually thinking about it. I was talking to that person about it. But yeah, I don't make enough time for games. I play like an hour here and there. I know what you're trying to do with this question, Lloyd. I've already forgotten the names that we gave ourselves in that podcast episode. Was it R Dragon and R Dragon and Silver Lion, right? Well, it's on stream now. Did you answer your art name question? Was that this week or was that last week? That's a good reminder, actually. Let's go back to the question from Sniper Echo. Do you have any thoughts about streaming some personal work? That's a good question because I've been thinking about streaming personal work. I just need to find a time where I can do it on the regular. Because that is the thing about like excuse me. That's the thing about Twitch streaming, right? I think it really helps to have a schedule around it. So I'm currently looking into where I have the most time and where I can do it on the regular, because I would be interested in just focus streaming a little bit, or maybe even after a while turning this into not just purely an MMA, but also turning it into like I'm working and then you can ask questions, because I think that's going to happen anyway if I were to stream personal work. But I would definitely be up for that. Daar heb ik too. Maybe a different question, a different phrasing of the question. What thing do you often see in portfolios that turns you off? That's a really good question, because I've gone through a ton of portfolios recently. And what are some of the things? This is really specific to the school that I went to, right? Like when in DIA you have to, there's like in the second year or the third year you have to make a modular environment, and it's almost always the same thing. Just great textures, barely any life in the environment itself, because it has to be focused on I think they can use modular assets and then try to texture them with trim sheets. So a lot of people, it's their first time making a trim sheet, so they go for like the really safe option of just having gray materials on everything, and it makes everything look so dead. So there's some people that spice them up with decals again, or they add like licks of paint to certain aspects. So that is definitely one of the things that I've been seeing recently, but that is really specific to that one school, right? I think more in general is scale, like an understanding of scale. Like if you don't need to have a character in your environment, but it's good enough to have things that we relate to as relatable to characters, like stairs, chairs, tables, all that kind of stuff. We instantly get subconsciously how big they need to be in relation to other pieces. So say you have a staircase that is way too big, and then you have a chair that is perfectly sized. There's instantly that disconnect of like, wait, is that a chair? Is that like a staircase for giants, or is that chair too small? So keeping all the chairs relevant to each other, well, all the aspects in your environment relevant to each other, while constantly checking the scale of things with a mannequin in Unreal Engine, or it can just be a cube of like 1.8 meters, the standardized height for people, so that at least you have something to base your scale upon. But yeah, trying to think, what else? What thing do you often see in portfolios that turns you off? Because it's kind of harsh to say that it turns me off, right? Because it doesn't really, like, it's more about things to improve. It would be interesting to look at other portfolios more from other schools as well, and kind of see what they're up to too. So that might be interesting. Yeah, and the biggest one that I keep hammering on when it comes to that is not telling a story. Is like, it's a really nice environment and I can see what you're trying to do, but it's not saying anything to me. Like if you can tell a story, like if you really think about a story, that story that can also inform your props. So you could have what was the recent example that I came up with? Like I was talking to someone about like the new work that they were going to do, and it's like it was a simple room, but then if you tie a story around it with like COVID, for example, where everyone's getting sick, everyone's trying to stay inside as much as possible, what if this gets out of hand, what if riots start to break out, that kind of stuff. If you start building on that idea, like what would people do inside of their own room to keep holding on to society for as long as possible? Like it's an interesting thought experiment, but if you can nail it down to, like, for example, what if the power goes out? What would people do? Would they buy generators to keep some of their most important electrical equipment working, or would people go outside, go try live naturally again, like not in the big cities, right? Like go hunting, bring back the hunts and scavengers from other houses. Would people go that way? So there's a lot of stuff that you can get out of just those two divergent ways where you can really tell a story with that. Yeah, I can't remember either, Lloyd, if we answered that. Feynor, I mean, I'm a first year and not sure what I want to do as a job later. I heard it's best to know it as soon as possible so I can start working on my portfolio. Yep, totally agree. But it's also not too late if you want to switch once you're inside the industry as well. So that's really important to keep in mind. Once you're in the industry, it's not over. You can still switch. But it's a really tricky thing. I would try, especially as you're a first year student, I would try and dabble in as much as you can and try a variation of things, which if you're at DIA, you're gonna try a lot of stuff. And then another thing that I try to do from like the second year on is when I got an assignment, I would always try to turn it into like an environment art piece somehow, where we had to create like a pedestal for like a hero character, like in the menu screen character selection thing. Instead of making only the pedestal, I made that into like a forest ruin scene where it was not just like a pedestal, but it was more than that. Because I was always trying to find my way how I could do more environments, basically. So that is something that I can definitely recommend. And also, this is actually something that we talked about on the podcast before. Actually, the recording that we just did yesterday. And it's being honest with your teachers too. Like not from lesson 1, but say in the middle of the second semester, you're like, okay, I 100% want to do environment art. Just explain that to some of the teachers as well. And say that, look, I know that this is a character art class, but I just want to be honest and open about it, where I might try and make up for, like, how should I say this? I might focus a bit more on environment art of things rather than on the character art of things. As long as you make it through, right? It doesn't have to be like an 8 or a 9 out of 10. As long as you make it through, like that's all you need. And that's also what I did. I was never good in characters either, but I was really open that I didn't want to really dive into that. Yeah, Milan, exactly that. I had an assignment in the second year to make a game with blueprints. So what I did is make an environment I wanted and then put a game in it. Yep. Yeah, exactly. That's a good example. Yeah, I think that's a good thing about DIA. They kind of give you this blank slate to a certain extent, where there's still enough movability in the assignment itself, where you can just be like, okay, I know that I need to make this, but I can kind of squeeze in like an environment, right? Like instead of making it focusing on the game with blueprints, in this case, you could make an environment where you have a game with blueprints in it. So yeah, very good example. Libari 724. How would you actually describe a core idea or what you wanted to express for a scene? Like, for example, you mentioned the COVID room. How would you actually describe a core idea or what you want to express with a scene? Well, for this scene, like the COVID room, right? Like let's take that as an example. Like you said, it could just be COVID has spiraled out of control. People are society has collapsed. Like the message behind it. So let me backtrack a little bit. So COVID has run wild. Society has collapsed to a certain point. People have basically gone through like factions and what you would normally see in the post-apocalyptic games, right? And that room could be an expression of, this was a computer nerd trying to make do with his PC as long as possible. So then what would like a computer nerd do in this case? Like maybe plug in a generator, like try to keep that PC running for as long as possible. Maybe try to hook up like, I don't know, like a connection, like a self-made Wi-Fi connection system for as long as possible. So yeah, I think in this case that would be the core idea, right? Where it's COVID. This was like a person that was addicted to his PC or was really dependent on it, and then going from that idea, it's like, what would he do to keep it running as long as possible? How do you mean the message behind it? It might be some sort of a weird example, right? Because if you start digging into it, like you're not gonna have Wi-Fi for that long. If society collapses, you're not gonna have the internet anyway. Because yeah, the message behind it could be anything you want it. You could also go more I'm thinking about the original trailer of the Division, where that game came out. It was really good at storytelling without showing any actual characters in the trailers, where you would have like shots through the apartment where you have like bed sheets moving to indicate that someone got sick, someone was trying to, well, make them better, but it wasn't working. And it was his wife, but then after a while he tried to stop people from coming in because he had like lots of supplies in the room. Didn't really work out. And at the end he committed suicide as well. But there's no characters in it. Like everything is invisible. So that is like actually sending a message that there's a lot of stuff happening in this world, but a lot of it is invisible to a lot of people. It was a really, really smart and well-produced trailer for that. Yeah, I know. I might not have done the best explanation when it came to the COVID room. It's kind of a tricky one because it starts to fall apart in some cases, right? But yeah, if you've got any other questions like that, just let me know. Next question by Feynar. What did you want to do in the industry when you just started as a student, and how did that change through the years? So as a student, I started out wanting to become like a concept artist. That's how I got into university anyway. But then I think in the first year we discovered modeling. I never modeled anything before. I was like, oh shit, this is cool. Then in the second year we explored environment art and just building worlds. And that just, I always had the feeling that I didn't want to do characters, so I was sure about that, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do outside of that. And then in the second year we did environment art, and that then grew into my passion over time, where I just had so much fun making these environments, telling little stories with them. Well, back then I wasn't even trying to tell stories, it was just like getting the technicalities out of the way. But how did that change through the years? Yeah, I think once I got to environment art, I knew that that is what I wanted to do, and it hasn't changed since then. I still want to do environment art. There's some more stuff that I want to go back to, like concept art. I still want to explore that, like I mentioned in the first part of this live stream. But environment art is where I feel comfortable. I like telling stories. I like building a world where people, or like, well, not in the case of my personal work, it's more like small scenes, right, where people can think about what happened there and try to get the story behind it. Yeah. But I'm open to change though. I don't think I'll ever completely steer away from environment art. And I know that I'm definitely never going to do character art. So those are the two things that I know. But there's so much else, right? Like maybe for like hobbies I might go into 3D printing at some point and do more physical stuff. I don't know. It's always interesting to look ahead at the future and just explore new things. That's what I've been doing with the whole Beyond Extend stuff too. There's like a lot of technical, organizational, like um, marketing, just getting yourself out there too. That is, it's it's so interesting. Like all these different aspects, I like dabbling in it. I know that this got slightly off the rails, but I think the first bit of the question answered your question. Might be thinking too hard. Yeah, man. I know why you asked that question, and you shouldn't be overthinking it. To be honest, just say what you want to say, and if the other person is gonna have some feedback on it, that's totally fine. Don't try to be perfect from the get go. Like making art is a fluid process. There's going to be changes. There's going to be iterations. So don't try to hit a home run from the get go. And good luck too, man. It's going to be awesome. Okay, a big question from Lloyd. A big question might want to add to the list. Where do you want to take, where do you see Beyond Extend in the future? Yeah, that's a really good question. And this is where my exploration of so many things and my excitement about everything that I'm currently doing or I want to do is sort of biting me in the ass, right? Because there's so much opportunity, so much possibilities of where I could take this. And I just love experimenting with stuff like this, like the live AMAs, which I'm actually really loving. And that's also why I'm thinking about doing more live streams where I talk about my personal work and work at the same time. But yeah, when talking about, I wanna provide more resources to the community. That's one thing that I'm still thinking of, and there are some things that I have in mind and that I'm slowly working on. Because I spoke about this before, I think, but I'm really interested in the idea where we can have people come in to the community and do like a class on something. It could be anything, right? Whatever they feel comfortable in. And I've started to reach out to some people to kind of gauge if that is like an interesting thing for them. So yeah, that's something that I'm slowly working on. I just need to take a little bit more time because I'm always rushing from one thing to the next. And maybe that means that I'm not planning them out really well. So I just need to take my time with this and then properly think about a structure that makes it achievable from my end as well. And also that I don't have to worry about it every week or every month how often that I want to do it. Because yeah, there's been a lot of experimentations going on in the last couple of months where everyone probably still knows that I was talking about a grass tutorial at some point, but then I couldn't work out how to get the information across in a nice, consistent manner in video format. And then I started reaching out to people for that, but I just felt that my heart wasn't really in it. And that's why I was like, okay, maybe at some point I could do like a more live thing like this, which is more fluid, more on the cuff, which is always a thing that I like too. So I think this format just works a little bit better for me. But yeah, that's definitely the big thing that I want to focus on. I want to get more resources into the community and have people do live classes and then record them as well for people that can't make it for other time zones. And yeah, I might do some of them in the same time as well. Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. Yeah, that's the thing, right? Too many ideas, only 24 hours in a day. I think the main thing that is sort of holding me back at this point is just I like to do things myself. So I still have an issue with just delegating stuff. And yeah, that's probably like a big hindrance for the community in general at the moment. So that's definitely something that I want to improve upon. Looking forward to seeing what comes of these come to light. Yeah, me too, man. I'm excited. And that's also the thing, like it's really fun to just experiment with things too. Like I wasn't sure that these AMAs were going to do well, but I'm really enjoying them myself. We got a nice amount of listeners here too, a good amount of questions, which I really appreciate. So thanks everyone for those. But I wasn't expecting any of this, to be honest. So this is awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate you all being here too. And I think we've been going for like an hour and a half, well, minus that little interruption in the beginning. This kind of sucks, but hey, what do you do, right? Yeah, so I think it's time to wrap this one up as well. I really appreciate all the questions. There were some really good ones in this one. And plot twist time, Tim. Da da da. Yeah, Libara724 is just my my new bot account. Oh god. All right, so yeah, thanks everyone for popping along. This was a really nice edition. Oh god. So thanks everyone for popping by, asking questions, and feel free to come along for the next one. I'm gonna do this every Sunday. So thanks everyone. Have a nice Sunday, and catch you in the next one. Oh yeah, I got a fancy thing to set up now as well. If you're interested in joining the community, you can click on those links as well. Because I think I saw someone trying to join the Discord. So those are the links. Thanks everyone. Have a nice Sunday. Bye.